Welcome to the Love Lab podcast, a safe place to get real about sex. Whether you're man, woman, single or couple, this is the show for you because, well, sex matters. We are your hosts, Kevin Anthony and Céline Remy.
All right, welcome back to the Love Lab podcast. This is episode 35, and it's titled, What to Do If Your Partner Wants Less Sex Than You. And before I even get into this, I would just like to celebrate that this morning, which is not typical on a weekday morning, we had sex this morning.
Woohoo! So we are pumped up and ready to go.
That's right. It's typical for us to have sex during a weekday, just not generally right first thing in the morning because you got routines and work and stuff like that. And it's kind of hard to squeeze it in, especially when you like to have long lovemaking like we do.
It wasn't hard to squeeze it in today. It was hard and easy to squeeze it in.
That's right. So I'm starting today's episode with that celebration.
Thank you, Kevin.
So let's talk about our topic, because this is something that we hear about a lot. We hear about from people that we work with, from friends. You know, we often see these instances where there's a mismatch in sex drive, where one person wants sex more than the other. And so when thinking about this episode, the very first thing that came to my mind was, I want to know what the stats are as far as who wants sex more. Is it women that want sex more, or is it men that want sex more?
So we started to look around and went on the internet, and we came across this very interesting study.
Yeah, but before we even get to that study, though, what I thought was really amazing, and I don't mean to interrupt, but what I thought was really amazing is that it actually wasn't that easy to find information. So, I mean, we read a lot of articles in preparation for this episode, and I was really amazed that I actually couldn't find any hard stats about who wants sex more. The best that we came up with is a study you're going to tell us about right now.
Yeah, exactly. And so that study was done in 2009, so it's already been 10 years. And it was published in the Archives of Sexual Behavior. What we loved about that study is that it involved over 200,000 adults from 53 nations. So it's really broad. And what the study concluded is that men have a higher sex drive on average, higher than women, and that this is a large effect that is consistent across cultures. Now, interestingly, however, the study also found that there is more variability in women's sex drive compared to men. Ooh, so surprising. This tells us that there are indeed going to be a lot of women who have high sex drives that are higher than a lot of men. But on average, though, what it means is that there's a sizable difference in sex drives, such as that men tend to be higher than women. But again, there's not really it's not a generality. You'll find people all over the spectrum.
Yeah, so let's break that down a little bit. What they're telling you is that when they average it out, on average, men seem to report having a higher sex drive. But the only reason, what the study is saying, the only reason for that is because there's more variability in women, meaning that in any given sample of women, you're going to have some that are really low and some that are really high, and then a whole bunch of degrees in between. Whereas with the men, it tended to be a little bit more consistent.
Yeah.
Strange.
That sounds just
weird.
Like what we know.
So that's all they're really saying. So if you take the averages sort of out of it, what you'll realize, and this is what the study was saying also, is that there's a ton of women who have higher sex drives than men. And so when we were prepping for this episode, one of the things that I said to Celine, I said, I'm pretty sure I remember that you've worked with quite a few women who've had this, where they've had higher sex drives than the women. So I'm wondering if you could...
Than the men.
So sorry, than the men. Yes, thank you. I'm wondering if you could just tell some stories to our audience about what you've experienced with the clients you've worked with.
Absolutely. So one of the things that I do see happening, a lot of the couples that come and see me, oftentimes she wants sex more than he does. And they're kind of stuck in this dynamic where women are doing a lot of things nowadays and they're juggling everything, like from family, careers, and love life. And I mean, and sometimes that makes them stuck into more of a masculine mode. And that masculine mode, when it comes to the bedroom, is not sexy. If the guy is an heterosexual man, he likes women. He doesn't like men. Therefore, man-like behaviors are not going to turn him on. And quite the opposite, some of the very masculine behavior that she exhibits can also literally emasculate him, like castrate him. And it's not physical, but emotionally it does happen. And so those people, those couples are stuck in a dynamic where he's not feeling supported as a man. He's not being like seen and really finding his place as a man. She's stuck in like, I've got to do everything and I even have to initiate sex and I'm so tired. And so he's not stepping it up. And so they both feel somewhat bitter and very uncomfortable with their sex life, because then the sex life is not fulfilling. Nobody has a good role where they feel that it's supportive of their nature. And so oftentimes that's the type of couples that I work with, where she's like, I really want sex. This is why we're here, so that, well, finally he can, last longer to satisfy me, get it up, or like just really be more masculine. And so oftentimes their strategies to get there are not the right strategies. And that's why I really tell them like, yes, it's a good thing you're working with me, because I'm going to have you like put the right habits into place to have like long-term results. But once you start to rebalance that polarity, that energy, that dynamic, suddenly everybody's sex drive is starting to come higher and like everything seems to work better.
Well, I would guess, and I don't know if this is 100% true, but I would guess that when couples come to see you and work with you, I would guess that it's probably primarily the woman driving the couple to seek help. And I don't know that this is totally true, but I know that when it comes to sexual dysfunction, I'm pretty sure that if the woman feels there's a problem, she's probably, it's kind of like guys not wanting to ask for directions or read the instruction manual of that IKEA furniture. They're like, fuck that. I don't need these instructions. I know what I'm doing, right? Like, I think that maybe guys might be a little less inclined to seek professional help in those areas because they think they can solve it themselves. So I'm just bringing that up because it's possible that the people that come to see you are the women who are in that more masculine mode. They're more driven, like, okay, we're going to figure this out. We're going to solve it. They get in their sort of masculine problem-solving mode. But having said that, because there are so many of them coming to see you, it is extremely obvious that this myth that it's always the men that want more sex than the women simply isn't true.
Absolutely. And I also want to say that I also have quite a bit of clients where he's the one like, okay, he sees that she's got shame or issues, something really holding her back, and he wants to satisfy her. So that's a different approach. Like if he reaches out for support, it's because he knows that she's not satisfied in the bedroom and he wants her happy. And that's why he's seeking help. And it's like, she might be a little shy, and like as the guy, I'm showing her where to go. And so that happens. But yes, I've seen it all, and I've been in both relationship for me where I consider myself having a high sex drive, and I've had most of the time my partners had lower sex drive than me.
I would say in my case, I don't know about averages. I'd like to say most or not, but I would say in my case, most of the people that I've been in relationship with have had pretty similar sex drives to me. Maybe when I was really young, like, I don't know, 20-ish, maybe that wasn't the case. But certainly as I was older, I started to notice that the majority of partners I had were closer to my level. But, what I find interesting about that is just that, if I'm interested in somebody because sex is something that's important to me, I put it high up on the list, right? So as I'm getting to know somebody, it's a pretty high thing on the list.
A requirement.
Requirement. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for. It's a pretty high requirement, right? So if that's not there from the beginning, then it's pretty unlikely that we would even have a relationship.
Yeah, that you would not be a match. So one of the things that we realize is that women sex drives are more influenced by social and cultural factors. And so we've got a lot more that we want to share around like women's sex drive, and I can't wait to dive into that, but I kind of want to leave it at that. So it seems like men are more stable. There's this like constant of their sex drive. Women are more influenced by things and people and culture around them, which makes their sex drive fluctuates. So what I loved about what Kevin just shared was he's like, okay, I know like that I'm pretty sexual. So when I am getting into a relationship, then I want to make sure that we match. And what we call this, like, what's your sex number? So where are you basically on 1 to 10? So like, where would you put yourself, Kevin?
Where would I put myself? Oh, that's
a trick question.
That's a good question. On a scale of 1 to 10, well, so I have an idea in my head of where I think I fit, but then if I try to compare that to like the average world out there, the average person, I realize they might be two different scales. So like on my scale of what's considered like, wants sex a lot, I'd probably put myself more like an 8, But when I realize how much sex you and I have compared to the rest of the world, I'm pretty sure that I'm a 10 on most people's scale. I'm just not a 10 on my own scale.
That's funny. I was going to put you at an 8. And we didn't prep at all for this question. It just came up like this. And I'm like, I would give you an 8. And I think I would put myself at a 9.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're a little younger than I am. Well, I laugh and I make that joke, but the reality is that if you had asked me that question 10 years ago or 20 years ago, it would have been a very different answer.
Curious. So, if you're listening, like, think about that. What's your sex number? Know where you're at, because ultimately, if you're at 8, 9, you can't pair up with somebody who's a 2. You're never going to be satisfied if you are in a monogamous relationship with that person.
Yeah. And knowing your sex number isn't just for when you're looking for a partner. So basically what we're doing now is we're talking about what do you do if you're in a situation where your partner has a very different number than you do. So the first thing is to know what the numbers are.
Yeah.
Right. So like, if you consider yourself a 9 and I'm an 8, like that's pretty damn close.
Of course.
Right. Like that's pretty good.
Yeah.
And honestly, if I had to choose, like, if there's going to be a mismatch, would I want my woman to be higher or lower than me? I would always want it to be higher. I would always rather be in a problem of abundance than a problem of lack. So yeah, great. I mean, if you want to boost it up to a 10, go for it.
It really depends, and we'll talk more about that. Sometimes I can be in 10, but there are circumstances that make it be a certain number.
So the point is that knowing your number is important, obviously, if you're looking for a relationship, because you want to try to find somebody that matches your number. But it's also important if you're in a relationship, because what you do about the mismatch will have to do with how far apart you are in that mismatch.
Yes. So our episode is what you do when your partner wants less sex. So that's assuming that you're the one who has a higher sex drive. Now, the question here too, so now you know your number, you figured out where you are, hopefully you know your partner's number too. But is it really what you are after? Is it sex, or are you trying to meet another need through sex?
This is a big point. So know what your number is, but what's behind that number? What is it that you're really seeking? Because it may be that you really just want the physical sex, but it may be that what you're really craving is simply connection.
Absolutely.
Which can be met in many other ways.
Yeah. And so I think this brings down again to our communication piece where you gotta talk about your sexual needs and create a menu of activities where you can, with things you can engage in, whether it's a solo activity or partner activity. So having that discussion. So now you're clear on your number. You notice that maybe you are not exactly a good match, or there's one that's way higher, way lower. Now trying to figure out, okay, I'm trying to get my physical needs met, or I'm just trying to have intimacy. Intimacy that could be met through hugging, through kissing, through a light massage, through cuddling, exactly, through laying down on the floor like we did last night in our room and laughing like crazies.
That's right. Sharing appreciations for each other.
Yes.
There's so many ways that you can really get that need for connection met that don't involve physical sex.
Mm-hmm. And so if you are higher, then have that discussion, then you got to get your needs met, right? And so one thing that's really, really important, if by the way you're the one that's lower here, you cannot blame or shame your partner into wanting sex. Whatever you want is just perfect. Whatever your partner wants is perfect. We can't blame them or shame them for that.
Yeah, that's a huge piece because this is actually where it usually ends up going. In most couples, it's why won't you this or you that or you, right? And that is the worst place you can go. And what always amazes me is when we work with clients and we hear stuff like that, it's like, wow, talk about doing the thing that will bring about the exact opposite of the result that you're looking for.
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, any guy that's listening, if you've ever tried this approach, you hopefully saw just how horribly it works, right? If you start saying, well, you never want sex and you don't do this and you don't do that, has that ever worked? Has that ever gotten you more sex? No, of course not.
And by the way, same for you ladies listening. If you ever go to your partner and go like, hey, you're not kissing me, you're not romantic enough anymore, and you don't give me flowers, and you don't even initiate sex. I always have to do it. You should do it more and make sure I know you want me.
You just did, I think, all of the 4 C's in one shot.
All the things not to do. Yes. So you want to be able to support your partner in getting their needs met and their wants met. And so one of the things that I love is to be able to become creative. And now that you're able to have a communication and you're defining what does sex look like, where are the boundaries, what do I consider sexual, what is not, and like, let's say masturbation is a sexual act. And I think masturbation has a wonderful place if you are in a monogamous relationship and your partner does not want to have sex at that point. You can take care of yourself.
Maybe they'd like to watch.
And that's the scenario I was going to say. So let's say you're in that communication and the person's like, I don't want to have sex. I'm not in the mood for it. But how about I kiss you and gently stroke your body as you masturbate?
Yeah.
Hey, that could fulfill that need for that connection and intimacy and have that sexuality part. And for the one who doesn't want sex, it might be like, great, I'm off the hook, but I'm still supporting my lover in getting their needs met.
Yeah, that's really beautiful.
I like that one. It's a beautiful scenario. And one thing too that I found is really cool is that oftentimes is when you're not in the mood and you see your partner getting like sexy, masturbating and touching themselves, I find it really hard not to get excited. I go like, well, now that you put it this way, move that head, Kevin. We still have 10 more minutes of our show.
Let's hurry up and get this over with. Just kidding. I would like to add 1 or 2 things that aren't on the list. Something I was thinking about after we prepped for the show, which is that, if you're a guy and you're listening and you don't feel a strong desire for sex, we do know that testosterone is one of the things that is the primary drivers of, sexual desire. So it could possibly be that you simply have an imbalance of the hormones in your body. So, simple things like working out, doing strength training. And there's lots of different...
Clearing your diet, like removing like junk food, sugar, and including more like
Getting rid
live
of...
food.
Yeah, and getting rid of all of those...
Processed.
Well, the processed foods, but what are the fake estrogens? There's a word for that. I'm drawing a blank. See, this is because I didn't prepare this.
The xenoestrogen?
Yeah. So the estrogen-like substances, the things that mimic estrogen that are in a lot of foods, a lot of soy-based foods, processed foods, beer, even the linings of cans, all of the BPAs and all those things that can mimic the estrogens, which can actually lower your testosterone level. So the focus of this episode isn't so much on the health and nutrition part, because we could do many episodes on each one of those pieces, but I wanted to kind of make the point to men out there that if you're not feeling a strong desire for sex, it doesn't mean that there's something physically wrong with you, but it's an area that you can look at. Absolutely. Because most young, healthy, vibrant men, and by young, I don't necessarily mean 20, it could be 40, 50, even 60, but if you're vibrant and healthy, you should have some desire for sex. So if you're not, it's an area to look at.
Yes, absolutely. And if you want help with that, our course, Power Up Your Erections, we cover all of these different things in there, changes and
Yep, and we even have some workout programs in there, some really simple, basic ones that don't require gym memberships. They don't require a bunch of equipment. All they require is for you to show up.
Exactly. So you can check those out at powerandmastery.com. So I really want to get into that piece around arousal. And so what to do is, first, you want to make sure that you schedule sex. Okay, so sex needs to be in your schedule and needs to be something you do. And now, when you schedule sex, you're not always going to want sex. Okay, there's this myth out there. So Master and Johnson's I think it was in the 50s, had created this this sexual response model where they were like, okay, there's desire, I want to have sex, arousal, I'm getting turned on, then there's that plateau, I'm like, I'm lingering into that heightened state of pleasure and arousal, and then orgasm, and that's kind of the four phases that they've created. And something that they have started to realize in later studies is that most people, and especially women, they don't really find themselves in that place of like spontaneous desires to have sex and like can't wait to take their partner's clothes off, right? I'm so aroused, I must do you. It does happen, but it's not always the everyday norm, right? And so there's a newer school of thought that proposes that we actually might have it backward, this model, and that at least as far as women are concerned, okay? So some sex researchers now believe that this arousal first mode of desire is more typical for women. So that means that we feel aroused, but we don't feel the desire.
That's this morning.
I actually said that to Kevin, and he was like, oh, let's have sex. We just finished our morning meditation. And actually, last Friday, I climbed on top of him after meditation as a surprise. And, and he was like, I just had a flash in my mind of a rerun of Friday. And I was like, well, I did too. And I was like, let's do it. And I'm like, but we don't really have time and stuff. And I'm like, and then I said, I don't think I'm ready. I don't think I'm open for it. Like, see, I don't think my body is. And it's like, well, let's check this out. He's like, so I'm pulling down my pants.
Now, see, I know my wife here, right? So I know that when she says, well, I don't think I'm ready, she's always ready. So I said, well, let's just see. Let's find out. And sure enough, she was indeed ready. So what I think is so great about that, well, it's great because we had sex, but but what I think is so great about the fact that happened this morning, and now here we are recording a podcast episode, is that it's such a perfect example of exactly what we found in the research, which was that you were already aroused, but in your mind, you didn't necessarily have the desire.
Correct.
Now, why this is important to know is because if your partner wants less sex than you do, you have to understand how this cycle works, because how you address it's going to be different. So if they have the desire but they're not turned on, you might do one set of actions. And if they're turned on but don't have the desire, you would do a different set of actions.
Yes. And that's really some of the things that I work with clients. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because you're like, okay, what can you do? And what you do when the person is aroused but not feeling the desire, you actually need to help them to get into their bodies. And so focusing on physical sensations, because then you start to notice that the body is indeed aroused, and then the mind can believe it because you start to see that when you focus on your physical sensations. And also having a regular practice of meditation, aka mindfulness, where you teach your mind to slow down, to turn off at times, because for us women, we have diffuse awareness, so we can do multitasking, and it can really get in the way. And we have all these thoughts. We have these thoughts from like the dishes that we didn't do, the body that has maybe extra cellulite, or that we didn't exercise, or maybe assumptions about the partner's expectations, and like. And what that does is it's all in the way. It gets in the way of our desire because we focus on these things. And so if you can understand that maybe you are reversed, maybe you're not following this traditional of desire, arousal, plateau, orgasm. You might be arousal and then desire comes in, and then you can enjoy the arousal and then have an orgasm. Then it doesn't matter whether or not you are in the mood, you create the mood.
Yeah, and that's a huge thing that we teach our clients and throughout our courses, is that you don't have to be in the mood to have sex. You can create the mood.
Yeah, because if you are in a relationship, you've made an agreement to be there for one another. And now that we're talking about this, I think it's, well, one thing too, I want to say stress. I want to really say, like, remember, we talk about this a lot in other episodes, but stress is the biggest libido killer. And Kevin likes to say stress is a boner killer.
That's right. I've called it the boner killer.
The boner killer. And you got to do things that reduce your stress level. If you're both at a place, and I know that when we allow ourselves to get too stressed out, where we do too much work, too many things, both of our libido goes lower, and we're like, okay, what can we do? Let's go spend time in nature. Let's give each other massages. Let's go out and do, I don't know, play mini golf. Like, do something fun, creative, different that helps to lower the stress level, and that makes a big difference.
Yeah, that's a huge one. I noticed for me personally that's really a big one, is that when I'm working too hard and I'm too stressed about either how many things I have to get done or whatever it is, I definitely find that I'm less turned on and I'm less pursuing sex.
Yeah.
Now, for me, that doesn't mean that I won't have sex. So in those moments, sometimes you're the one that will pursue, and then it doesn't take much, and it'll get me going. But I'll find that I'll tend to pursue less when I'm really stressed.
Absolutely.
And then the weekend will come and I have a couple of days off, and I'll get rested up and I'll start to feel energized again, and then all of a sudden I'm chasing you around the house.
I know. Boy, do I love Monday morning. So back to the relationship piece. I think it's really important. Is first of all, like, you might want to see, like, is monogamy really for you?
Yeah, this is a big one. So if you've tried everything, all those other things that we just talked about, and there are others that we could add to it too, and you just can't come to a compromise, you can't seem to get your numbers anywhere near each other. I mean, there are extreme cases where one partner literally has a 0 on a scale of 1 to 10. It's pretty hard to get a 0 anywhere close to an 8 or a 9 if that's where you are, So that's an area where it's perfectly okay to reconsider whether or not monogamy is the right thing for you.
Yeah, and so we have episodes on threesomes. We have we'll make an episode on how to open up your relationship, and so just stay tuned for more. But reconsider and see how it's something you want to talk about with your partner? What are the rules and all of that? I mean, it's going to take too long right now to explain that. But
just to let people know, this is a perfectly viable solution.
yes.
Because if you're still in love and you have, like we've known couples, they have, a house together, they have kids together, they have businesses together, and they've got all of this stuff, and they still love and care for each other, but they just don't have sex, and they don't really have a desire to have sex with each other. And when you have a situation like that, it's okay. You got to create the structure around it, but it's okay then to say, hey, you know what? You have this need. There's this one need that I just can't meet for you.
Exactly.
So here's how we can have that be met.
Yeah.
Lots of ways to do it. We've talked about it in previous episodes. Maybe we'll even do another one.
I'd love that. And then honestly, rethink whether or not you're in the right relationship.
Okay. So this is last on the list for a reason, right? Because we love love and we really hope that people can find ways to make it work no matter what the circumstance is. But at the end of the day, if you've done everything that you can do, you've tried it all and there's just no compromise and they're not willing to allow you to have your needs met elsewhere and there's just no way that you can solve this problem, then you might want to consider whether or not this is the right relationship for you.
Yeah. And this is not a decision you take lightly. This is not something you do. You just had babies together and then, hey, it's normal. You might not have access to your wife for 2 years after a baby. And like all of these things, there's life, there's cycles, it's cyclical. Like you don't make those decisions. Oh, it's just been 2 months like this, so now I'm out. Okay, we're not telling you to take a hasty decision. These are things that you have talked about and you have to put everything into place. Like you have to look into scheduling your sex date, talking about your sexual needs, you creating sexual menus, knowing what you want, asking for what you want, becoming more creative, understanding that, hey, maybe you don't feel like it, but do it and create being in the mood. And then go to those other solutions and be like, okay, maybe open up the relationship. Or if it's not possible, then be like, okay, this might not be the right relationship.
Yeah. Well, there you have it, everybody. We've given you a lot of tools and a lot of suggestions. We know this is a common problem, so hopefully this will help some people out there listening. And, give us your feedback. Go to iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you found us and give us a rating, give us some feedback, send us a message and let us know how this podcast has affected your life. Tell us that you had sex last night. We would love to hear that. All right, everybody, we will talk to you next week. We hope you liked this episode of the Love Lab podcast. If you enjoyed this show, leave a comment and share it with your friends.
And if you want more, we have an entire digital library with the best sex tips and relationship advice at CelineRemy.com. That's CelineRemy.com. So join us in the Sex Vault to continue this adventure.
Thanks for listening.
And remember, you're amazing.